Welcome to the Primo's Musings podcast.
Good evening, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. We now pivot to major number 3, the 126th U.S. Open Championship at Shinnecock Hills. Like we know that we had Rory win the Masters, we had Aaron Rai win the PGA at Aronimink. So we have Shinnecock Hills, which is the 126th Open in Southampton, New York. It's starting tomorrow and then goes all the way up to Father's Day, like every U.S. Open does. I think this course itself. Let's quickly talk about your impressions before we get to our favorites and dark horses. Want to talk a little bit about the courses because a lot of the news now has been about the course, about the wind, about the greens, about fescue. So let's quickly talk about that before we get into the rest of the golf course and also who's going to actually eventually win. And this time, I'm not going to get you to pick Scotty Scheffler because that would
Man.
mean that he would finish his Grand Slam, but that's okay. Let's talk about that. But let's quickly get your initial impressions on the conditions and the course itself.
Okay, so thank you. So basically, yeah, so the US Open, as we know, is historically the toughest test of the four majors, usually the US Open, and then usually after that, I guess it's often the British Open just due to because of the weather over across the pond. But the US Open is usually the toughest test just because of not necessarily the weather, but we'll talk about the weather as as it pertains to this one. But usually they just make the fairways are the tightest, the rough is the most penal, and the greens are usually the fastest. So that's usually it's a greenskeeper's challenge to kind of keep the score of the winner at the U.S. Open like right around par. That's what they're kind of how they that's their goal. They don't want to be the leader to shoot 10 under or 12 under like we often see at the PGA Championship on some occasions, or sometimes even at the British Open if the weather is more mild. But yeah, but Shinnecock is one of the more historic U.S. Open locations. I think this is be the fifth. I think the fifth
Yep.
time that it's hosted the U.S. Open, and last time I think was 2018 when Koepka won. And like you said, it's the most just looking at photos or the videos on coverage this week. It's kind of set up very link style course. It's the most link style you're going to get. Besides, of course, a traditional links course over in Scotland or Ireland. So it has a link style course. It's not very pretty to watch on TV. It's not going to be like lots of trees and lush green. It's, just kind of all looks kind of the same, very homogenous. But we can't appreciate a lot of what makes it so tough on TV. And that, like you alluded to, is number one, the weather being the winds coming right off the Atlantic, right off the Sound, right off the Long Island Sound. This is in the Hamptons. So the wind is traditionally usually 15, 20 miles per hour, just constant all the time with gusts up to 25, 30 miles per hour. So
They're probably
like Chef,
expecting more tomorrow, I think, especially
yeah.
tomorrow. But I think you're talking about the average 20 miles an hour
Yeah,
wind.
most days like 15 to 20 miles with gusts up to like 30. And then, yeah, you're right. There is I think a front coming through tomorrow, they said, which can make it more challenging for the group that has to go out, I think, in the morning potentially. So it's all timing in the first 2 days too, which group you're in. It's what it sometimes come down to. But then, yeah, so you mentioned the weather is one of the more challenging things. Just, these players have to play weatherman and then know how to really adjust their shot according to and the miles per hour of the wind. They have whether to club up like one club or do a three-quarter swing. They have to really be experts, which they all are. Obviously, they know exactly what to do with a 15 miles per hour wind or this or that. They know exactly the calculations to make, and their caddies have it all worked out for them. But that's what makes it so challenging. And the gusts can change as they swing. As soon as they hit a shot, they can hit the perfect shot, but then the wind maybe shifts. In the moment they hit their shot, so that can throw things off. But then also the rough here, it's a lot of they widen the fairways. It sounds like from what I've heard to like 50 average fairways, like 50 yards wide now. So they've widened it to make it a little easier off the tee, but still with the wind, that's going to be challenging. And then the rough, if you're off the fairway, it's like kind of thick, deep fescue. You're in big trouble. You're not getting to the green from there. You'll be hacking it out and lucky to get anywhere, around the green. So it's going to come down to a lot of scrambling if you don't hit the fairways. And then lastly, like you said, every time they've had the U.S. Open there that I remember in the last few years, in 2018 and 2004, the players just, afterwards, it's the talk is all about the greens being unfair And whether they dry out from the wind or they don't water them enough or whatever the reason is, the greens, players have so much trouble keeping if you're above the hole, keeping the ball on the green, it'll just roll off with if you're a few feet by, even a foot by the hole, if you go a foot too long, it might start rolling off. And I think we can all recall that back in 2018 when Phil was so disgusted, he was out of contention, I think, at that point, but he hit his putt when it started rolling off the green. He thought it was unfair, and he just before waiting for it to come to a stop, he just tapped it back up the other way and then putted again, and it was just a whole calamity. He was out of contention, so I'm sure he got a penalty for it. But that's kind of the image that's ingrained in our minds with respect to the greens. So yeah, so like I said, the main thing is the toughness of these greens, how what the greenskeepers are going to do to them if they're going to hopefully they'll keep them at a reasonable speed to start, and then as the weekend progresses, I'm sure by Sunday, by Father's Day, it's going to be then they'll be at their peak speed. But hopefully bottom line is hopefully they're fair. We don't want someone to go a foot past the what a putt that would go a foot past, and then the ball rolls off and then they have a three putt or a four putt they're looking at. So that's kind of a summary of the conditions and what the course is all about. I'll let you comment on things a little bit before we go into our players.
Yeah, I think the difficulty of playing the scores, at least from, looking at, you said 20, I think 1995 was when Corey Pavin won, and then it was Retief Goosen, and then I think Kepka, right? I think those are the three players who won it. But to your point about the wind is something that's going to be very interesting. It could be like punishing on one hole, but then you have to adjust the ball flight accordingly the next hole. It could be completely different. No two holes are different. The other thing is the fescue that, I was listening to Gary Williams and he kind of mentioned the fescue a lot. If you miss the fairway and your ball ends up somewhere in the thick or intimidating fescue rough, it can be just advancing the ball is going to be a challenge. The other one that you talked about, which they did talk about, was the complex greens that you talk about, where you said that the risk of a ball rolling down 50 yards down because you miss the approach shot in the wrong spot, you're just pretty much left with almost like an impossible up and down. And then you just kind of talked about the Phil Mickelson thing. It's not like there are very difficult holes in this, right? But the bottom line is that you have uneven lies, winds that's consistently changing from one hole to another. The rough, everything could make for an interesting. It's almost like a mental challenge for the golfers, and that remains to be seen. And one thing that I did hear was that if the wind was going to be really hard tomorrow, like if it goes up to 35 miles or something, I just heard somewhere, it could be that depending on where the pin positions are, maybe they'll make it a little more. I would say easier for golf, at least for them, not for us, but. So that's where you think about, right? So I think, yeah, I was saying like 86 was Floyd, 95 Pavin, 2004 was Goose, and 2018 was Kepka. And prior to that, it was in 1896. So to your point about to 5 times it has
Sometimes I
hosted.
guess, yeah, yeah.
That's it. You're right. So,
Yeah.
and then the temperatures tomorrow is expected to range for the next 4 days. Some rain in the forecast, but everything is going to be beautiful summer, 80 degrees every day. So I think that's going to be fine. It's the wind that's going to be the key here. Now, let's quickly go down to the contenders, the chasers, the dark horses. So your thing about, let's talk about who you think are the contenders, and then let's pick your two and my two, and then we'll pick the dark horses, and then I will talk about any kind of trivia if I have anything left.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the obvious we kinda know the obvious contenders. Obviously, we just looking at the world golf rankings, you gotta Scotty, although he's kinda had a slumps, some people say he's in a slump, he's still had, basically every finish he's had has been in the top 10 still in the PGA tournament and every PGA event he's been in this year, and he's only won one tournament this year outright, but, he's had several, like, top 5 and top 10 finishes. So obviously we got Scheffler and Rory who just won the Masters. Cam Young and Matt Fitzpatrick. Kind of rounding out the top 4 of the World Golf rankings. And, those guys, and then you can't forget about Fleetwood, Rose, Rahm, all those guys as well. So those are kind of obvious your obvious contenders. Aaron Rai, you mentioned coming off the PGA. I don't know how he factors in here. I'm not sure if he's not a big driver of the ball. I don't think. So and this course is pretty long, and if you're not a big driver, I think this course could be difficult because when you're hitting your irons in, you don't want to be hitting, an extra couple clubs into these greens that are so tough to stop your ball on. So if you could have a 9 iron or 8 iron and flight the ball higher versus a 5 or 6 iron coming in on some of these longer par fours, that's a huge advantage. So that could hurt him, the fact that he's not a huge driver of the ball. But But he's hot. He's obviously got confidence and momentum right now, coming off the win at the PGA. So yeah,
Yeah,
those
Dan, I wanted to bring one point. You were telling about something, the course being very long, and it's funny. I was actually listening to Gary Williams, and I think I know there's one gentleman who kind of said something to the effect of, everybody thinks it's a long golf course. To be honest, it's only 50 yards longer than Aronimink, so it's not really a long course. Like, he was kind of like, yes, it is still a long course, but for everybody who says it was a long course, it is not as long than this one. So okay,
right.
you know what? Let's quickly get down to, like you said, right? We've already done the who are the favorites. I think there's a lot of all these odds that have come out, definitely in terms of like who potentially win. Will this be Scotty's chance to complete that, because he's already won three trophies for a career Grand Slam. Rory's thinking about his second US Open trophy, although the US Open that he won was not in this kind of conditions. So, and then what do you say about Tommy Fleetwood? Like, he's before really Tommy became Tommy. I think he did shoot like 63. That's usually unusual on this course in the final round, and he was just, I think it was like a shot shy of like Brooks Koepka. So
I
again,
think you're right. I think he was, yeah, he was second place. You're right about that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't even realize that until
Forgot about that.
because
Yeah.
I didn't realize. So, but then, like you said, right, you got Wyndham Clark, Matt Fitzpatrick, Cam Young, and then a lot of these players who are contending for it. And the U.S. Open typically, as you know, has typically favored someone coming out of the blue from the left field. Like you had JJ Spawn or Wyndham Clark. These are the golfers who have won the US Open previously in the last few years. So will it be the favorites? Would it be the major winners, or will it be someone from left field coming and winning it? So let's quickly get down to your assessment or your top two golfers you think could win. And then
Okay.
I'll come with mine. Or maybe, yeah, and then we'll do the dark horses after that.
Okay. Well, I'll respect your wish of leaving Scotty out of my picks,
And
but
I will leave Rory out.
I'm okay. I'm pulling for Scotty. It'll be his 30th birthday. They said on Sunday, so that's kind of a little cool thing. Maybe he'll win it on his 30th. And another interesting fact before we get to our favorites trivia here is they said if Scotty were to get the U.S. Open on Sunday, and then obviously he would have his career
Grand Slam.
slam or career Grand Slam. It would be Scotty and Rory in back to back seasons closing out career slams. Last time that's been done by two players dates back to I think the 50s or the 60s when it was Gary Player and Jack Nicklaus, who
Wow.
in back to back seasons each closed out their career slam. So just interesting trivia there. But anyways. So we're not going to take Rory or Scotty. So I'll move down. So like I said, this course I think demands that you're an expert ball striker, an expert iron player, because you got to be able to put those balls into the green in specific spots. If you miss by a couple yards or maybe 10 feet, it could just trickle off to green, and then you're hoping that you can scramble well. So I think the elite strikers that I see I'm looking at the world golf rankings. I like Cam Young, and I'm going to go down to someone we haven't really talked about much. Well, I think you might have picked him for the PGA was Xander Schauffele, good iron player. And I've some people out there like on the Gary Williams show. They've been talking about him a lot this week, kind of really favoring him just because he's been trending up his game a little bit from when he was injured about a year and a half ago. And he's an elite ball striker. He always has a great record at the majors. Does well at the majors, so the moment's not too big for him. It's yet to be seen if the moment is too big for Cam Young. He's number three in the world. He's won several tour events, but he hasn't really contended, I don't think, on a final day of a major yet, but maybe this will be his opportunity. He's a New York kid, New York guy, so maybe the crowd will be behind him. So I'm going to go with, for my two picks, Cam Young and Xander.
Okay, interesting you mentioned Xander, because some of the things I've heard about Xander, and I think you would find it very shocking. Did you know in the U.S. Opens that he has played so far? I think 2018 was the first time he played the U.S. Open. Except for one time, he's always finished in the top 10, and that is pretty impressive. I
That's
mean,
why I like him
I
as a
don't.
pick. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I was about to pick Xander too, but I think you took it, because when you think about what we're talking about, Shinnecock, right? It's the ultimate test. Yeah, because it's not going to reward anybody who has a one-dimensional game. So somebody like a DeChambeau or Rory who can hit the ball a long way, I think it may not really favor them. I think it's going to be, you need to make sure that you can control your spin, control your flight, control a lot of those things. So those are the things that favor the score. So since you picked Cam Young and and Xander, I'm actually going to go. I'm going to pick. I think John Rum actually has played well lately. So John Rum is one of my guys I'm going to pick as well, one of the winners there. And then I'm really thinking about the other one. I think you got Tommy Fleetwood. I'm just going through the list here. Who could win? Well, Rom is actually, yeah, he's like 1175, I think. But I would go with Kepka, and I'm going to go with Matt Fitzpatrick. I mean, he won at Brookline. You know, he was a 2022 champion at Brookline, and he doesn't have power, but he has like a lot of distance control, good course management, and I think he has a lot of patience. I think if you remember, he did beat
Hmm.
Scotty in that. Was it in Hilton Head? I
But
think
the
he beat
Harbor Town, yeah, Hilton Head,
the
yeah, yep.
Harbor Town course, and it's very similar. I think I heard one of them mention it's very similar to that. So I do think that, like you said, it's a link style. The fairways have been widened, but someone who's got ball control. I think I'm going to go with Matt Fitzpatrick and Rom. So I'm going with two Europeans, and then you're going with two Americans. So
That's right.
okay,
That's right.
yeah. So let's quickly talk about the wild card dark horses you think could potentially win this.
Yeah, so I'm kind of looking down to the, I guess, for dark horses we'll consider the second page of the World Golf Rankings. Looking at like, I mean, the rankings like 11 through 20. Looking there, I mean, I'm still waiting for your guy Ludwig Oberg. Maybe I'll take him as a as a dark horse. He's ready to, I think one of these days, get his first major. So
We
he's a,
keep saying that for the last 3 years.
and we're waiting. So why not? I'm going to go with Ludwig, and then we'll go with the for our friend Peter, the Jersey guy, Chris Gotterup. He's a huge
Got
drive.
her?
He drives the ball a mile, and I know you said it's not a huge advantage to drive at this course. I think it is, just because it puts you so much further down there, and you're hitting lesser irons into these greens that are impossible to hold the ball. So arguably a lot of the approach shots are going to possibly run right off. So yeah, let me go with Ludwig because he's sentimental guy at this point. He's got to get one, and then what do you call it? The Rutgers boy, Chris Cotter.
Chris Carter. Okay. All right. I was thinking about this thing, but I did hear about. I was kind of debating between Russ Henley as one of them. Does Kepka count as one, or
Yeah, you
would
can
that
count
count?
Kepka. Yeah, I mean Henley.
He's
I would say,
actually
yeah, Henley's number 5 World Golf Rankings. Believe it or not. So yeah, I would say I'll give you Kepka as more of a dark horse than Henley, even though
okay.
Kepka's won so many
Okay.
majors.
All right. I was actually like, kind of doing Kepka, and then I thought the other one I'm going to go. This is really dark horse, I think. And can I do Tommy Fleetwood or no?
I mean, it's like I said, first page. Well, I wouldn't call it dark horse, but at this
He
point,
hasn't won
second,
any. He's not won any major. Actually, he's won the FedEx
if
Cup.
you do
That's about
Kepka
it.
and Fleetwood, you'll have the guys who finished 1 and 2 in 2018, finished first and
That's
second.
true. That's
So
true. But you know what?
hard to
No,
call it a
I'm not
dark
going to go
horse,
with
but yeah,
Tommy. I'm
yeah.
not going to go with Tommy. In fact, I'm going to go really outside there. I'll go with Russ Henley. I'll go
Okay,
with Russ Henley, and
Kepka,
yeah,
Kepka.
yeah, Russ Henley, and yeah, let me settle down. Yeah, Russ Henley and Kepka as my guys, and then you have that. I actually debated even thinking about like a Patrick Reed or even like Minwoo Lee, who has actually played pretty
Yeah,
well. But I think that's going to be a tough thing for. I don't know. Let's see. So we got. I mean, again, if Scotty or Rory win, I will give each other credit. So that's our third pick. I'll give you Scotty if because you always pick Scotty. So if
yeah, I'll
Scotty
be pulling for
wins,
him regardless. Yep, yep.
yeah, you're going to pull for him. So I think if Scotty wins this one, if Rory wins, I get credit. And
Sure.
then I got like Rahm Fitzpatrick, and you got like Xander and Cam Young then, right? And then we have the dark horses. Okay. Interestingly, any other trivia that you thought you wanted to
Yeah.
talk about, or
I've got one trivia question that's it's just an amazing fact. So, like I said, the U.S. Open, it's been there before. You could say either 4 or 5 times. I'm looking now. The 1896, they only played 36 holes then, so maybe they're not considering that a an official U.S. Open. But regardless, we'll say the first U.S. Open was 1986 that was hosted there. So 86, 95, 2004, and 2018. So there's been 4 U.S. Opens there. Over 650 players have competed in this event. How many times has a player's final score been under par? So how many players have had a final score under par of total player? You would think dozens, right? But how many times in the
I
4
think
U.S.
it's
Opens
like
has a player broken
two
par?
or three. I think it's like 2 or 3.
Yeah, so 3. So 3 players have broken par out of 650 some odd players at this course. I mean, you can kind of guess who you have. Obviously, the winner is going to be the one who broke par. So they were
Must be Goosen. Was it Goosen?
Goosen was one of them, but then the two of the other champions did not break par. One was Corey Pavin was even, and Koepka was +1. So it was
Yes.
Goosen, and then the runner-up to Goosen in 2004 was Phil Mickelson, actually
Phil Mickelson,
-2.
yes.
He was some Goosen and Mickelson, and the third one was the champion in 1986, Raymond Floyd,
Raymond Floyd.
at
Yeah.
1 under. So
Yeah.
the best score ever at this course was -4. Hard to believe. It's crazy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear this one. This was actually pretty cool, and I this one. So there was something when I was doing my research. The AI stuff comes up, and it says one of the things about this tournament was that there was a kid called Miles Russell. I don't know if you heard about him. It's a 17-year-old amateur phenom who secured a spot. He advanced through all the qualifiers and things like that. I don't know why there's like a background here. Hold on. Okay. He his qualification gained national attention because his caddy, guess who his caddy for the qualifier was?
Was this okay? Now that you mentioned that, it's Tiger's son, right? Charlie
Charlie
Woods.
Woods. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned the famous caddy. I did hear that. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think apparently he's being grouped with like Patrick Harrington and Cam Smith. So I think who's the 2022 Open champion, and we have not heard about Cam Smith
Oh,
in a
Cam
while
Smith. Ever
right
since he
now.
went to no
He
kidding.
went there. Yeah. So I know you have to go for your pickle. So I want to make sure I am, we're cognizant of time. But I do think that I'll be doing obviously a day by day quick recap. And maybe I was thinking about like after Friday, or maybe a Saturday or Sunday, like maybe we'll pick like the day off the day before or something like that at the final round.
Sure.
We should probably try to do like a final thing. But, I actually debated even thinking about Aaron Rye for this one because he's such a good ball striker. He doesn't hit the ball long, but then I think he already just won the PGA. I thought it'll be somebody else. It's not going to be easy for somebody like him to, repeat that performance. So anyway, so there we are. The 126th Open starts tomorrow. It'll be a fun round, and I want to see, like you just mentioned about this, where only 3 players have been under par in that course. So it'll be, let's see what the final scores will be tomorrow at the end of the round. Okay.
Very
All
good.
right. All right. Just hold on a second. Thanks again. Good night. Have a good, fun time at Pickle.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Primo and Dan will be back soon.